is our light and our life. It's always good to be back at Bethany Lutheran. Thank you for your warm welcome today. I want to begin simply by bringing you greetings from your siblings in Christ at First Lutheran Church in Colorado Springs, where I worshiped last Sunday. They are still very much grieving the loss, the very sudden loss of the husband of their associate pastor, Carrie Bayless. And so they know many have been praying for them, and now they send you their prayers, love, and care for the ministry you carry out. Next week, I'll be with the folks at Christ the Servant Lutheran Church in Louisville as they continue to recover from the impact of the Marshall fires. So, good people of Bethany, I will ask, but I take it for granted that I can take your love, care, and prayers to them. May I not? Thank you. It's also a day of celebration here in our synod. Pastor Monica Butler, who was just ordained a few weeks ago, will be installed this afternoon as the new pastor at Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Greeley. She'll also serve as campus pastor for the University of Northern Colorado. And then this evening, we'll be welcoming Wiley Cook as the new associate pastor for House for All Sinners and Saints. Wiley's ordination is still a few weeks off, but tonight they'll be preaching, and we get to welcome them to their ministry. So lots to celebrate as well. So I wonder, when you hear the story of this widow's offering, what does it elicit from you? What image comes to your mind? What does the widow look like? How is she dressed? What's her demeanor as she drops in these 2 coins into the temple treasury? How does she walk away? And what then does all of that do to you as you hear the words of Jesus? This poor widow has put in more than all those who contributed to the treasury, for all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty has put in everything she had, all she had to live on. Well, I'm not completely sure where my images of this widow come from, but I have a suspicion that they were shaped by one of those Sunday school coloring sheets I had as a kid, and I'm just going to tell you, it wasn't this one. No, the one I had, it was that series back in the day when, the Sunday school pictures were supposed to be describing or portraying the Bible stories as they really happened, which always didn't leave me wondering then, but it made me wonder now, how is it that Jesus in those Sunday school drawings always looked like a white European and never like a brown-skinned Middle Eastern man? It's something to think about. When it comes to this particular story, though, I have this image of the widow that I'm quite sure was framed by one of those Sunday school pictures. She's an old woman. She's dressed in black. She's bent over, and this thin hand reaches out to drop in the 2 coins. And if you can see her face, it's kind of lined with grief as she makes her way slowly and painfully past the treasury. Well, with that kind of image in my head and with the words of Jesus in my ears, what the story elicits from me is guilt. I feel guilty that I give out of my abundance rather than out of the fullness of my life, right? Does that resonate with you at all? Maybe it does. But I also wonder if a different image of this widow would change how we hear the words of Jesus and maybe would transform what this story elicits from us. I have to say, one of the issues in how we hear the story is how we name it. Typically, the story is referred to as the widow's offering, or sometimes it was referred to as the widow's mite. Anybody hear that one? So I wonder, what if we called this instead the story of an incredibly generous widow? How might that change our image of who she is? How might that change what this story elicits from us? I can tell you, when I think of this as the story of a very generous widow, my mind creates a very different image of her. It actually creates an image of a woman that I'm going to call Cora for our purposes today. Cora is a widow. She's a member of one of our congregations in the synod, and she is extremely generous with her very modest resources. Imagining Cora in the role of this widow, it changes everything for me. What this story then elicits from me is not guilt, it's inspiration. Cora inspires me. So let me tell you why. Why Cora inspires me with her generosity of spirit. As I said, Cora is a widow. She lost her husband some years ago. Ed was a school teacher. Cora worked in a school cafeteria. Cora is a fourth-generation African-American Lutheran, the daughter of a Lutheran pastor, something she is very quick to point out to you if you ask her, so how did you become a Lutheran? Cora is far from bent over or sorrowful like the Sunday school image I have in my head. No, on the contrary, when Cora is in the room, you know it because her laughter gets there before she does. When you ask her how she's doing, you can anticipate one of two answers. She'll either say, "I'm blessed," or she'll say, "I'm grateful." Gratitude just kind of oozes out of Cora, and she is not shy about thanking God in the moment for blessings large and small. She'll tell you, she and Ed did not always have an easy life, but they were always blessed. Cora doesn't just express gratitude, she cultivates it. Every morning and every evening, she told me once, she writes down the 10 things for which she is most grateful that day, morning and evening. And when you thank her for her generosity, her standard line is, "Well, why not? Everything I have is a gift, and gifts are meant to be shared." I don't know about you, but that attitude of being grounded in gratitude inspires me. Cora is generous because she's grateful, and it inspires me to want to cultivate both gratitude and generosity in my life. Another thing about Cora that inspires me and has everything to do with her generosity is her deep connectivity. I like to call Cora the connection queen. She's the one in her congregation who knows everyone and knows everything that's going on. She knows her fellow elders, of course, but she also knows all the kids, and not just the cute babies or the toddlers. She knows the middle schoolers by name, and she can talk to them about their interests, whether it's music or sports or video games. Because of these deep connections, people look out for Cora. One of the high school students regularly shovels her walk and mows her lawn, and people check in on her to make sure she has what she needs. What I love about imagining Cora in terms of this gospel story widow is that her deep connections extend beyond the immediate circle of her congregation. She's one of those people who knows what's going on in the Rocky Mountain Synod because she pays attention. She gets our weekly E-Connection newsletter, and she has been a Synod Assembly voting member more than once. She's particularly interested in our 3E, Educate, Equip, Enact ministry, part of which is designed to ease the educational debt of pastors and deacons. Cora is the one who pointed it out to her pastor. She has also expressed appreciation for our efforts in the last year or two to be more explicit in our synod about engaging racial justice, because she knows herself firsthand what it's like to be a person of color in our very white denomination. Cora is also connected to the ministries of our larger church. She reads her Living Lutheran cover to cover every time it comes out, and she has a particular passion for God's Global Barnyard, which is part of our ELCA World Hunger Program. So what does that connectivity have to do with generosity? Cora's deep connections to her congregation, to our life as a synod, to the ministries of our larger church means that she sees the bigger picture of church better together and why that matters. She would instantly appreciate our second lesson today, where the Apostle Paul instructs the faithful in Corinth to share their financial gifts with their siblings in Jerusalem, because that's where the need is. Connectivity generates and inspires generosity, not only within the church, but through the church for the life of the world. I love thinking of the widow in this story as giving so generously in part because of her deep connectivity to all that the ministry of the temple in Jerusalem represented for her. A final thing about Cora that inspires me when I think about her in the role of this widow is her simple trust in God. And by simple, I do not mean simplistic. I mean clear. I learned very quickly from Cora herself that she does not subscribe to the everything happens for a reason or God has a plan kind of theology, where God is somehow the secret author of all the hardships of life and designs them for reasons God only knows. No, Cora's theology and her simple trust in God became clear for me when we were talking about some painful things going on in this world, and she responded, "Well, I wonder what God's going to do with this mess." Well, I wonder what God's going to do with this mess. Whether that mess is in our world or in our church, the simple trust that God will do something redemptive with it is at the heart of our Lutheran theology of the cross, where on the cross we see God's commitment and capacity to redeem our messes with love, to create something good out of chaos, and to bring life from death. That simple but profound trust that God will redeem our messes with love inspires me to hang in there when our world is a mess, when my world is a mess, or when our life as church is a mess. I know there's lots of speculation these days about the value of institutional church, and there's this assumption that organized religion, with all of its human flaws, can't possibly serve the well-being of the world. I also know that attitude is not new. There were plenty of folks in Jesus' day who looked at the temple in Jerusalem or at all of those local synagogues and could only see the human deficiencies in them instead of their God-given potential to serve as broken yet blessed instruments of love and grace. Such detractors would certainly have discouraged this widow in the story from giving anything to such institutions, let alone to give all that she had to live on. Yet if she was anything like Cora, and I like to think she was, she gave with the simple trust that God not only knows how to use imperfect vessels, but God is committed to redeeming every kind of mess with love. Beloved, I don't know what this story of a generous widow in Mark's gospel might elicit from you now that you've met Cora, but I hope and pray it will lead to inspiration, that together we might experience a life of robust generosity, grounded in gratitude, shaped by a deep sense of connection, and fueled by a simple trust in the God who redeems everything and wastes nothing. That same God invites us to the table today, yet again, where Christ himself shows up to feed us from his abundance, and where the Spirit then sends us back into this messy world as Christ's church together. So come, friends, come, let's be fed together, and then let's head out into that messy world to share what has been given so freely to us. I know a particular widow who will be cheering us on. Thanks be to God. Amen.